So, hey, it's good to be here. Welcome everybody. It's a little chillier than where I flew up in from last night down in Florida, but I'll take it. Anything under 60 degrees causes Floridians to wear puffy coats immediately. So I do actually have my puffy coat in my back.
Or Uggs.
Yeah, or Uggs. Yes, I've got to get some now. So anyway, Jake, you've got a lot of we've got a lot of cool things to talk about here today. I think so because it is tech, and there is a little tech element to Amazon's business, right? Even if it's a grocery business. But for the audience, Amazon is in so many different businesses, and just that has to create somewhat of a branding challenge in and of itself. But just for the audience here, talk a little bit about who Amazon Fresh actually is and what's different about it.
Yeah, so Amazon Fresh, for those that may or may not know, we have both physical store locations as well as online delivery platforms. So most people probably know the online delivery piece, but it's essentially a grocer. And we have pockets throughout the country. It's more of a regional in-store space that has physical locations. But at the same time, our bread and butter is really the online portion of the business. So we are separate from Whole Foods. Whole Foods is one entity that Amazon owns, but Amazon Fresh is its own grocer in and of itself. Our branding is a bit different versus Whole Foods. The variety and selection of our products. We have more mainstream brands, for example, that we sell through both in our physical store locations as well as our online delivery platform. So definitely growing, and the future is pretty bright.
Very cool. Thank you. So before you jumped into the online grocery business, you had a long storied history with big consumer brands. I think most notably PepsiCo. Going from like kind of a bread and butter, brick and mortar type brand into Amazon online grocery, Amazon Fresh. What was that transition like, and what learnings did you take from the more traditional legacy consumer packaged goods experience, and how did that translate into your work at Amazon?
Yeah, it was definitely a transition period for sure. My background was more traditional CPG, food and beverage branding, PepsiCo included. And to jump into Amazon Fresh specifically, you kind of have to start with the similarities. What's similar across the board? For sure, putting the consumer first and top of funnel, top of pyramid, however you want to think about it. But everything should drive from a consumer insight, essentially. And that's equivalent across the board, whether you're CPG or a tech-driven company. And then it's leveraging those insights to create some kind of action using data. I think that's also obviously on the tech side, it's very important. But coming from CPG, you can't really have a strong campaign or a strong product launch without having true insights to back that up. So those were core similarities. And then also innovation, thinking big. Clearly need that on the tech side, but you really need that from a CPG perspective as well, because if you don't launch and relaunch and innovate, then you're becoming stagnant at that point. So those are the similarities that I kind of glommed onto as soon as I jumped into Amazon. But then there are differences. The pace of work, the pace of deliverables, the quantity of deliverables, while still not sacrificing quality. That's a big adjustment. The CPG world is fantastic, but they move at a bit of a slower pace than the tech side. But and a company like an Amazon does help in terms of having mechanisms in place so that you're not there doing all of the manual nitty-gritty work. You actually have some tools at your disposal that maybe CPG might not have that helps you think more strategically and then work on different work streams at the same time. But at the end of the day, I also found that for me personally, at least, it was adapting the pace to the consumer, not necessarily to the organization. So Amazon's going to want to think big. They're going to want to, throw tons of innovation out there. And that's not necessarily where the customer might thrive, especially in the grocery industry. They're not necessarily the most tech-savvy folks. And so throwing a ton of innovation all at once just because we have the ability to do so doesn't make it the correct thing. So for me, that was kind of the beauty for me of the CPG experience, is being able to bring that lens, the retail lens, to tech versus having tech kind of just take over. because the consumer is only ready for a certain amount, and they kind of need to be eased into certain innovations. So it's almost like calendarizing, slowing down the pace a little bit within this really fast-paced environment, because otherwise it just goes over the consumer's head, and then you lose them in an instant. So, yeah, in that regard, it's slowing the pace, but sometimes external factors do play kind of a key contributor. The pandemic, for example, forced innovation onto consumers. You know, grocery delivery kind of skyrocketed during that time frame. A lot of people weren't necessarily ready for that, but that's not something a company can force onto the consumer. Many times, external factors play a bigger role. So it's kind of a push and pull situation. So it's important to just identify those situations.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom and insight there on really following the customer as opposed to just innovating for innovation's sake, right? But just, what was it like? Did you find yourself to be a voice in the wilderness, or did you have a lot of support in terms of the culture of Amazon Fresh, not being about just technology for technology's sake, but really paying attention to the shopper in that experience?
It's interesting. There's pushback for sure, because a lot of folks, whether it's tech or not, but they get set in certain ways. And so if you come in and try and disrupt, there's initial push. But Amazon specifically, they're very customer oriented. So if you come in with the insight that says, here's why we're driving the disparity, here's why we should slow down, and it's customer first, Amazon listens. That's one of the key leadership principles, is customer obsession. And so to me, it might have bucked the trend of what had been done, or that particular org's, let's say, mentality. But beyond that initial push, if you come in with reasoning and rationale, then you kind of get that the follow through throughout the org.
So you did bring up the pandemic, and during the first presentation from Bloomingdale's, she talked about customers wanting to get back into a store, right? That the human element, the interaction with people, was actually a good thing, and people missed that. It's just kind of at the same time, the pandemic arguably just grew Amazon's, the business we all, the app things, the online ordering, it just went through the roof, right? Because nobody wanted to go talk to anybody. They thought it was going to kill them, right? So you just want to be holed up in your house or your apartment and just wait for the delivery. So that had a really positive impact, at least on the sales of Amazon, the traditional Amazon we all know and love. What kind of adaptations, or what have you seen post-pandemic in terms of the grocery shopping experience? And that, is Amazon Fresh not just a place to shop, but a place to be, as Bloomingdale's put it?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, for Amazon specifically, the pandemic skyrocketed just awareness and the business itself. During the pandemic, I was actually at PepsiCo. And at the time, really, there are a few things that you really should be doing in any kind of situation like that. And that's first, identify and accept the reality of the situation. You have to adapt as a marketer, be nimble, be malleable, and then future-proof your strategies. At the time, just jumping back to PepsiCo for a second, I was on the Mountain Dew brand, and our bread and butter was our single 20-ounce single SKU convenience-oriented item. And that shifted completely to the bulk items, 2 liters, 12 or 24 pack cans, because people were buying in bulk for value and also safety at the time. So at the same time, we also had to find a new avenue to sell to customers, because they were not able to go into stores, at least the way that they wanted to, and in the frequency that they were able to previously. So for us, it's identifying the situation, being able to adapt our supply chain, of course, but then how are we serving the customer? So to date, our e-commerce for PepsiCo was an afterthought, single-digit percentages. No one was really even caring. It's really more brick and mortar. And then all of a sudden, it's 2, 3, 4x into double-digit percentages that now we have to care. We have to actually apply a strategy for our omni-channel perspective, whereas we were really just focused on brick and mortar. So there was a forcing mechanism for us to really future-proof our strategies moving forward, becoming more of an omni-channel, working with an Amazon, for example, to sell the product to the customer. So then fast forward to Amazon Fresh now, and we're kind of in this post-pandemic world where during the pandemic skyrocketed, and now we're kind of seeing a bit of a taper off from a customer perspective in terms of behaviors. But we've gained a whole slew of new customers who never thought that they would even consider online delivery, and now it becomes part of their weekly routine. Personally, I'm one of those. I never thought I would order online, and then pandemic struck, and now I can't go back. To me, the value prop for going into a store just makes no sense when I can have it delivered to my doorstep. So it's interesting to understand the moment, but then also react to it after the fact. And now just figuring out where is the omni-channel approach, and that's why for Amazon Fresh specifically, we're growing our in-store footprint, because we know there is still a world where people want to go into a store. They want to see the produce. They want to see the actual items. They want to pick it out themselves because of the trust factor. And they're used to it, or they want to get inspiration, whatever recipe they're cooking for that weekend or the following week. So there's room for both, but definitely the online experience has skyrocketed over the past few years.
I definitely get the trust when it comes to produce. My wife and I tried. We do a lot of online grocery delivery, but the produce is like one of the ones, and she's a great cook, but that's the one she just doesn't trust the shoppers to bring the right stuff to the home. So it may not be curated luxury goods, but making sure you have the right head of lettuce, can be important sometimes, right? Especially if you're a foodie. So PepsiCo, you spent almost or just around 10 years there. How did that experience, if at all, kind of prepare you for your experience with Amazon and your role there?
Yeah, it was. It definitely helped to a degree, but you never know until you jump into something new how different it's going to be. But I tried at least to use my dissimilarities to my advantage, coming into a kind of tech-forward, tech-savvy environment. I always come into with the equation of what might I know that others may not, that I can help kind of provide guidance on, or at least influence to. So, for example, do tech-savvy folks know the core principles of brand marketing? Do they know what the grocery experience should be, both in-store as well as even online? So those are things that I kind of gravitated towards driving influence into. For example, so when I first joined Amazon, I noticed that we have tons of data, a lot of first-party information, everything you want to know about your own customers, you have at your fingertips. But there wasn't necessarily an emphasis on competitive information, which I was very shocked by, because coming from a CPG world, it's all about what are your competitors doing, what's out there, how can you match innovation if not exceed. Whereas from an Amazon lens, it's very much like, well, what are we doing? How do we beat ourselves? And then the competitors are more or less secondary, which there's room for both, I understand, but to me, you can't have the full picture unless you have the competitive context. So it was a bit of an uphill climb, but for me, it wasn't just using first-party data about our customers, but then bringing in third-party vendors, IRI, Nielsen data, et cetera, to really talk through, well, what's going out there in the competitive landscape? There are decades-old grocers, Walmart, Kroger, et cetera, that we can learn from. Not necessarily mimic, because obviously we want to do our own thing, but it helps set the context. So for me, adding in that layer was definitely a CPG forward approach, bringing that into this kind of new environment from an Amazon lens. So I try to use my dissimilarities to kind of bridge the gap wherever possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. Leverage your differences to your advantage, right? Yeah. So back to tech a little bit. We do a lot of work with iconic and heritage brands in grocery, retail, sports and entertainment, consumer goods. And what we've discovered with our clients over time is that, especially when you're dealing with a very well-known, let's say, heritage/iconic brand, doing digital things, doing innovation for the sake of doing innovation can actually cause more harm than good, right? Your brand, you can't lose your soul of your brand. And so I did notice that when Amazon Fresh first, your in-store experience first came out, like the big splashy technology was the whole, grab and go, right? which was like very Orwellian to me personally. I'm like, how are you doing this? What are you watching me do in your store, right? You've since kind of moved on to smart carts. I don't think you've disabled the paying the grab and go, but just in the vein of using innovation in technology to meet the customer and the shopper where they're at versus where you think they ought to be. Talk about the journey from in some of the technology challenges and lessons that Amazon Fresh has learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of grab and go, just walk out technology versus let's call it a step below of a smart cart. So a smart cart is essentially a shopping cart. You go into the store. It has sensors, weight sensors, and cameras around the cart itself. So you can take something off of the shelf, place it in, it knows what the item is, and then it scans up onto a screen that you have on the shopping cart itself, what the item is, quantity, and then cost. So you have a running tally of whatever it is as you go throughout the store. You exit the store, you know fully what you paid, bag your groceries, you walk out, and you don't have to interact with any kind of cashier. So that's kind of step one, let's say, in the technological advancement journey throughout our stores. The next level is kind of this just walk out technology. And we had both of those essentially throughout a number of our Amazon Fresh stores. And the just walk out piece is you scan in to either your credit card or your Amazon account. And then you take a card or take a shopping bag, take items off of the shelf into your bag, and then you walk out, and then you get a receipt after the fact. So no sensors, it's kind of the next evolution, and that's also kind of dictated by sensors on the shelves themselves as well as cameras throughout the store. There is utility in both, but customers didn't necessarily gravitate towards both in the same way. What we did, we're a big test and learn company. We love to just throw things out there, figure it out, and then pivot as needed. So what we essentially learned, what the customers told us, both verbally and through their actions, is they're okay spending a certain threshold in a grab and go or just walk out environment, but not necessarily the entire shop. The entire shop can be hundreds of dollars at a certain point, and to kind of not know your running tally or total or just walk out without understanding that, it's a bit of a bridge too far at this point. And so, but the convenience factor of having a just walk out really resonated, especially with the younger demographics on our end. So now we've kind of pivoted our approach, generally speaking, to have optionality throughout the journey, and some more of our smaller format stores, convenience stores, for example, Amazon Goes, as well as in different airports, you'll see the actual technology for Hudson News, for example, or in stadiums for sporting events where your convenience is key, and you can take a couple of items, walk out, and then trust that the receipt you're going to get is obviously going to be clean and accurate and not necessarily higher than you might imagined you would spend. So that's kind of the realm where we see the grab and go technology going for right now, some more of those convenience-oriented locations versus having the smart cart in our larger format stores. That's more your traditional grocery shop. But at the same time, some people still want to go to the cashier. Some people still want to self-checkout. And so we have all of those options within our stores. It's just a matter of whatever the customer prefers. And so that's kind of the biggest key learning, is providing the optionality to customers and let them dictate what they're comfortable to. Because you might start in one and then eventually graduate to, you know what, maybe I can see what the smart cart is all about, and then eventually go into an Amazon Go, and that's kind of the full funnel or life cycle, let's say.
So how is that kind of, you mentioned demographic. I mean, obviously, the younger generations are going to be a lot more comfortable in like embracing of technology, the digital natives, right? How does the demographic of your shopper going to dictate your technology strategy in store?
So it's a great question. So a lot of our stores are located in more affluent locations, also in bigger cities, Chicago, LA, on the coasts. So they're more prone to being open to this kind of technology and actually going in, not only just leveraging the smart cart, but even the just walk out tech. But at the same time, a lot of the grocery shopper is still a bit of the older demographic, not necessarily as tech savvy as the younger generation is. So that's why optionality becomes key, where you kind of want to graduate folks from one to the other if they're comfortable with it. But if they're not, then they can stay and maintain what they're used to. Because again, we're a customer obsessed organization, and we listen to what people tell us. So the worst thing you do is just force something on customers, because then they'll just walk out and they'll go to your competitor right across the street who's been around for decades and has the trust and the brand loyalty associated with them. So that's kind of the thinking in a nutshell on our end. But our demographic definitely varies store to store and location to location. But certainly the more tech savvy, younger side, smaller families has thus far to date been our bread and butter.
So just one final question. I think we'll open it up to questions. And but I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't ask you, like, okay, look into the crystal ball and tell us, from a shopper experience perspective, what are some of your biggest predictions that we can expect to see in terms of retail and grocery specific innovation in terms of shopper experience over the next 3 to 5 years? And what do you see coming?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In-store versus online is going to be different. The in-store experience, we see smart carts popping up not just in Amazon Fresh locations, but other grocers are kind of following suit as well. So I think that's going to keep gaining traction. The grab-and-go technology, I think also as it starts permeating other levers like the airports, stadiums, et cetera, that'll likely start growing its footprint to more of the larger shop experiences. So I would say within 3 to 5 years, maybe see some of that swing back around from an interest standpoint. And then online grocery is just, it's going to continue to evolve and develop. How much can we kind of integrate our offerings to the customer, whether that's within the overall Amazon experience and other of our partnerships or verticals throughout the company. But at the end of the day, customers care about value, they care about convenience, and optionality. So those are the 3 things that I think we're going to keep top of mind. And to be honest, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And that's the
I was expecting some kind of AI robots just to do everything for me. Honestly, that's where I was thinking this was going. But
don't discount it. But I can't say anything.
Drones and robots, baby. Jake Adviev, thank you very much. We're going to open it up to questions. Let's have a hand for Jake.
Hi, I'm Barbara Glasser. One of the things that we as marketers are responsible for is, I hope, is trying to create a more frictionless experience. And one of the things, focus group of one of the things that I've experienced shopping online for groceries within the Amazon family is a little bit of friction. And what I'm talking about is there seem to be firewalls among the 3 entities that I shop on Amazon for groceries at. So what I'm talking about is Whole Foods, Amazon Fresh, and what I'll call regular Amazon. And so Amazon Fresh sometimes sells Whole Foods items. Whole Foods doesn't sell Amazon Fresh items. And sometimes if I want a Whole Foods item, but I'm in Amazon Fresh, I can't get it. Sometimes I get bounced to the regular Amazon if Amazon Fresh doesn't have it. And then you have to pay in the separate channel for each of those brands. Is there any work going on around that specifically?
Yes.
You knew that was coming.
I knew it was coming. There's a lot I can't say, so I'm going to preface that. However, it is something that we have heard. You're not an N of one. I think that's been kind of out there, and it's understandable. There are some things that are going on in the back end work streams that I can't necessarily speak to, but it is very much top of mind for us to remove the friction from the process. Not even just between the different walled gardens, let's say, but even within our own specifically, within Fresh or within core, Amazon core groceries. Like there are still barriers for customers to get through. So I think at minimum, that's each vertical's focus area is how do you make your own vertical frictionless? And then from there, the combination into one, let's call it seamless experience, is top of mind. It's on our radar. But let's just say it's not as easy as the flip of a switch. You might think it is. That's what I thought coming into Amazon. I was like, great, like everything's going to be at my disposal. You have to build things, and a lot of times from the ground up. And then that's probably as much as I can say on the experience.
Yeah, and in Jake's defense, we work with a lot of traditional legacy grocers as well, and even they have challenges. They may offer a buy online, pick up in store for the grocery, but then you got to go in to pick up prepared food. So your Thanksgiving meal, you still have to go in and pay separately, and that's within one grocery store, right? So it's not a unique challenge to Amazon Fresh, but I definitely get you. And I told Jake this question was coming, even if I didn't ask it.
Hey Jake, Jeff Thompson, GoodRx. The first time I used the grab and go was at an airport, and it wasn't necessarily like out of convenience, it was out of novelty. I was like, man, this is really cool. I kind of want to try it. Just curious, did you see that single, consumer purchase out of the novelty kind of translate into repeat customers down the road?
It's a great question, actually. When it comes to novelty, you do see a lot more one and dones. And so people might see it, they might not necessarily, they might even enjoy it, but it was kind of there just to try. And then they move on, they go to kind of the part of their regular experience that doesn't necessarily include that. But the one and dones, there's still a percentage of them that do, or sorry, not necessarily the one and dones, but the folks that do try for novelty, there is a percentage that goes on to retain. And then that's kind of, you're almost the first to market in that regard. And eventually, if you tried it once, even if you don't try it immediately again, 5-6 months down the line, even a year down the line, you might say, oh, you know what? Let me jump back into the same store, see if has anything improved, has anything gotten better, what else is there that's novel about the experience. And so it does open up the minds, even for the one and doners, quote unquote. But yes, we do see a lot of folks jumping in for novelty, but there's still value for us in that kind of consumer target, if that makes sense.
Hi, I'm Allison Ehrman, and in another lifetime, I ran consumer marketing at Fresh Direct. Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges there, other than getting bananas accurately or like not underripe and not spoiled to the consumers, was I was always struggling trying to figure out how to create this sensory experience online, because going to the grocery store and food in general is such a sensory experience. You use all of the senses. And particularly when I would imagine you probably have more limitations to platform than I did at Fresh Direct, where Amazon is such a transactional platform. How do you balance like trying to recreate that sensory experience, bring out the emotion of food in such a transactional platform? Do you even try, or you just say, hey, we're going to go for the transaction and just go on the replenishment?
It's a great question. We are definitely more driven on conversion for sure. And people know us for that. So it is part of our brand ethos, let's say, for people to come in and say, great, I know what I want, I'm shopping, and then I'm out. However, brand awareness and building that brand equity and having some kind of storytelling is important. So 2025 is a great year for us because we're at an interesting inflection point for Amazon Fresh. We're under a decade old, but still not necessarily a new entrant into the market. So we're kind of at this point where we need to drive awareness. Who are we? How do we separate ourselves from others versus just we're there to give you all the access to groceries. And so that sensorial experience is something that's key and crucial, but doing it from the in-store perspective is very different than trying to do it from an online perspective. I think as we get into augmented reality, that is going to open up a lot of doors for us to have people even experience the shop itself in a store in a virtual environment. I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, but a little bit further down the line, perhaps. And so the opportunity exists, I'll put it that way. And it is definitely top of mind for us. It's just a matter of how quickly can consumers adapt to any kind of tech that we might be able to enable. Hence going back to the roadmap and making sure that we're not taking it a bridge too far, but then testing and learning. So certain areas might have these experiences before others.
I definitely would agree. There's a lot more opportunity to create more immersive and extensive experiences in the store versus just behind a screen. So we do see a lot of that as well. But yeah, thanks. Great question.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike and Jake. This is great. Any other questions? You got one? All right, we'll get one more in here.
Cameras in general, especially for vegetables and fruit, have you thought of having cameras where someone can have that sensory experience where they can see the fruit and say, hey, my personal shopper, pick that one, right? I want that head of lettuce. I want that bunch of bananas. Are you going that far?
I can't say much. However, if I'm talking about myself personally, yes, I have thought that far ahead of what that would be like an ultimate ideal. How do we recreate the in-store experience for the online customer? Because that's the biggest pain point that I would say that customers are non-switchers are kind of telling us is we want to see it, we want to feel it, we want to experience it. And so that is definitely going to be top of mind. Again, I think it's just a matter of how quickly can we get there? What is the consumer ready for? Even if we may or may not be ready on our end, it's all a matter of kind of the evolution of that space. But we are an innovator, and we do try and kind of come in with some of that, the new experiences. But me personally, I think that's the ideal state for. Absolutely.
I was thinking robotic cantaloupe thumpers myself.
Well, that was great. Thank you both. Appreciate your perspective as a marketer as well as a consumer.